Hey, this is Scarf Bonsai. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Nikon Z7. Thanks to Cameracraft in Rockville, Illinois for letting me try this out at their shop. The Z7 is one of their new full-frame mirrorless cameras with the larger megapixel sensor, so it's around 45.7 effective megapixels. With the camera, I was able to look at the 35mm f1.8, the standard kit lens, and also a 50mm f1.4 with the adapter. The Z mount itself is a 55mm diameter mount with a 16mm flange focal distance, probably one of the shortest flange distances out there in mirrorless cameras. The camera has a 1/8,000th of a second maximum shutter speed with the mechanical shutter. It also does have a silent shutter mode. I didn't do any extensive testing, but I did try it out at least completely silent in that case. However, the standard shutter is also very quiet on this camera. The maximum flash sync speed is 1/200th of a second. That is a little low for Nikon's higher end cameras, but it is sufficient for most situations. Of course, you do have auto FP sync if you want to use that. The fully extended ISO range goes from 32 all the way up to 102,400, so a huge range on the ISO. Nikon was able to get phase detection in the sensor itself. That's really a key feature on mirrorless cameras and very important. Seems to work pretty well. I didn't get a lot of extensive testing out of the autofocus, but I didn't notice any issues with my quick hands-on. It has the 493 autofocus points on the sensor that are phase detect. I also use some contrast detect, I guess in some situations, but have a few settings with autofocus, from pinpoint to wide and also auto area. So definitely a lot of options with focusing setup. Nikon was able to get a 5-axis image stabilizer in the camera itself. That opens up a lot of possibilities with older lenses, with video modes, with long telephoto. They apparently put a lot of effort into the electronic viewfinder. I don't know the details, but it is of course 100% view, 0.8x magnification, OLED screen. Battery wise, it takes EN-EL15 batteries. They're standard throughout a lot of their professional cameras. I don't know if it was the best choice possible in this situation, considering mirrorless cameras do need a lot of power. With their B version of this battery, you can charge with USB, which is a nice feature. I always like seeing that included. This camera seems very solid with video, however the Z6 probably has slightly better features. I don't know the specifics. This is the Z7 though, so I did get a chance to look at the video with this camera. Has 4K at 30 frames a second, does do the 120 frames a second, 1080p. However, I did notice there was a crop with 120 frames a second. You can also do a slowed down in the camera mode to get the 120, but it's actually at 30 frames a second rendered in the camera. I don't know, I guess maybe it's a personal preference situation, but both of them seem to have a crop in that case. An interesting feature of this camera with video is the timecode option. It allows you to sync up audio more easily. I don't know the specifics, but it is nice to see in there, especially for the more advanced videographers. You can use it both in the files and through the HDMI port. With the HDMI, you get full clean output at 4K with 10-bit. So definitely a great option for using some type of recorder to get that full ultimate quality video from the camera. There is a setting for adjusting the speed of autofocus in video that you can mess around with. Let's talk about handling of the camera. Of course, this is based on personal preference. It depends on you and how you like things to work. You definitely want to get your hands on this camera to confirm things for yourself. In my case, it's pretty nice. I do actually prefer the D750 grip over this one. This is not a bad grip by any means. I think it's one of the better full-frame mirrorless grips that I've tried. In this case, it's a little thick for my hands. It is decently deep, but it's also not as tall as I was hoping for it to be based on how my hand is positioned to press the shutter and use the front dial. So if you're a really big fan of the D750 grip, I would say it's a slight downgrade in that case. The diopter adjustment on the EVF is very nice. It's kind of almost a perfect way to do things. It's similar to how a watch works, where you pull out the little knob, adjust it, push it back in, it locks down. That way it won't change accidentally. I really like that. This camera doesn't have as many buttons to get direct control as a standard DSLR in their mid-range and higher-end cameras. So that's kind of a letdown in a way, but you can use something like the I button, which has a decent amount of functionality to it. At least you can use the touchscreen maybe. Really depends. I think it will take Nikon users some time to get used to this camera because they did change things up. The bottom of the camera is interesting. It has 2 extra holes. One is pretty standard. Those are usually used with grips on the side. But there is another hole behind the tripod socket. If it works with quick release plates that exist already, and it'll keep that quick release plate in line, which seems very appealing. The top LCD panel looks very nice. It is a little bit smaller than the usual DSLR ones, but it is high contrast. I'm happy with the mid-range command dial on this camera. It's got the lock, which is nice, and they added an extra user mode, so you've got U1, U2, and U3 to put custom settings into. I like how the electronic viewfinder pokes out away from the screen quite a bit. That helps out with not accidentally touching the touchscreen with your face or nose or whatever. This camera has the usual ports for this level of camera, and they did include the headphone jack, which is kind of up in the air depending on the camera level, but it is in there. And the port covers are very basic. It is nice that the port covers get out of the way easily when you open them up. Memory card wise, this camera has a single XQD card slot. Button wise, the camera does have the I button, which I mentioned. There is the AF on button, which I'm sure a lot of photographers like. That gives you 2 different ways to get focus with the shutter button or this one. There's a photo video switch with an integrated display button. Very nice setup in that case. It's quick and easy to go from photo to video and then use the display button to adjust what you want on screen with those 2 modes. A few other features to take note of. It does have peaking, fully featured, and that will be very helpful in many situations when you want to do manual focus, either with adapted lenses or standard lenses, really doesn't matter. I noticed the vibration reduction settings have 2 different modes to them. I didn't try them out, but they're there. Might be useful to take note of. One is normal, one is a sport mode. There are a few quirks to this camera that I noticed just in this quick hands-on. Of course, the single memory card slot, not necessarily a quirk, but potentially an issue for some people. And in regard to that, it's integrated with the thumb rest. Now, I don't know how that will hold up over time. We'll have to see, but you do put some force on that door constantly, depending on how you hold the camera. I think the engineers must have been running out of space to put things because they put a speaker on the top of the camera. Now it does look like there's some type of gasket or barrier between the speaker and, of course, everything up, but a little odd in that placement in my opinion. Overall, this is a pretty solid start with full-frame mirrorless for Nikon. Of course, the lenses I think are going to be the highlight of this camera. We'll see. Current offerings are in the f1.8 range and a little pricey in my opinion for the aperture size, but build quality seems solid. Overall, a very nice camera. It will depend on your needs as a photographer or videographer to see if it works well for you. I do think it'll be very nice for landscape photographers, depending on what lenses Nikon can get out. But you can of course adapt whatever you want to this camera. It has a very short flange distance. I do think this one will work well for studio photographers, anyone doing any type of situation where it's a little slower, more methodical in your photography. That way you don't have to care about the slower frames per second with autofocus, or you don't have to care about any situations like the single card slot. In those cases, I think this camera will be perfect for those people because they do get the benefits of a mirrorless camera with the electronic viewfinder that shows you what your exposure is exactly in all of those situations. So that was a Nikon Z7. Hope you enjoyed this video. Again, thanks to Cameracraft in Rockford, Illinois for letting me try this out at their shop. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Helps me out a lot. Likes and shares help out a lot as well. Thanks again.